with many a conflict, many a doubt, fightings and fears within, without, oh Lamb of God, I come, Lord, you carry me, and you lift my head up high. Your grace I don't deserve at all, but you love me as I am, just as I am. Just as I am, wretched and blind, sight, comfort, and healing of mine, all I need in thee I find, O Lamb of God, I come, Lord, I come. Lord, you carry me, and you lift my head up high. Your grace I don't deserve at all, but you love me as I am, just as I am. Just as I am. Just as I am, wretched and blind, sight, comfort, and healing of mine, all I need in thee I find, O Lamb of God, I come, I come.
this room this morning, but He is also with you wherever you are, and we can trust Him because He's so good. So let's take some time this morning and sing to Him. Remember when hope is lost and faith is shaken. Remember when you wonder if you're gonna make it. There's a hand stretched out through your deepest doubt. You can't pretend to see the ending or what's coming up ahead, to know the story of tomorrow, but we can stay close to the one who knows. We can trust our God. He knows what He's doing, though it might hurt now. We won't be ruined. Might seem there's an ocean in between, but He's holding on to you and me, and He's never gonna leave. No, He is with us. He is with us always, always. He is with us. He is with us always. We believe there is purpose, there is meaning in everything. We surrender to His leading. He wants nothing more than to have us close. We can trust our God. He knows what He's doing, though it might hurt now. We won't be ruined. It might seem there's an ocean in between, but He's holding on to you and me, and He's never gonna leave. No, He is with us. He is with us always, always.
He is with us.
He is with us always. Our faith is seen, our hope is real. Come what may, we're not afraid. Our faith is seen, our hope is real. Come what may, we're not afraid. We're not afraid.
Trust our God.
Always, always, we can trust our God. Always, always, we can trust our God. He knows what He's doing, though it might hurt now. We won't be ruined. It might seem there's an ocean in between, but He's holding on to you and me, and He's never gonna leave. No, He is with us. He is with us always, always. He is with us. He is with us always, always.
He is with us.
He is with us always, always.
He is with us. He is with us
Always.
always.
Our God is with us. Amen.
The weapon may be formed, but it won't prosper. When the darkness falls, it won't prevail. 'Cause the God I serve knows only how to triumph. My God will never fail. No, my God will never fail. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. There's power in the mighty name knocking down from any giant. I know how this story ends. Yes, I know how this story ends. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. I'm gonna see a victory. I'm gonna see a victory. For the battle belongs to you, Lord. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. Turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. Turn it for good. Listen. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. Turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good. Turn it for good. You take what the enemy meant for evil and you turn it for good.
through sickness and in health, in joyful times and in times of sadness. I promise to always be accessible when you need me.
Welcome to week 2 of our series where we are walking through some of the major themes in the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes. And I told you guys this last week as we walk through Ecclesiastes, this is kind of one part Bible study, one part sermon. And so I just want you to think about ways that maybe you can engage the text. Because there's no way in the world we're going to get through 12 chapters in 5 weeks. So if each of us would engage the text, maybe listen to it or read it daily, weekly, however that works for you. I'm listening to it on YouVersion every day. It takes me about 35 minutes to listen to it. And so I'm doing this. And I would strongly recommend as you do that to have a Bible with you and to have a notebook. And the notebook doesn't need to be a fancy thing. It's just great as something stands out to you, a question, a thought, anything at all, that you can jot that down. It really helps. I know for me, again, it's been a couple weeks now that I've been listening to Ecclesiastes every single day, and I have way more questions and way more things that I want to talk about the more I listen to this. I kind of feel like as we get to the end of the series, I'm going to have a way better grasp of the book just as we're kind of wrapping it up. Now, Ecclesiastes is actually wisdom literature, and it's really unlike any other wisdom literature that's found in the Scriptures. It has this earthy feel to it. It feels a lot more like real life. And the Qoheleth, the teacher, King Solomon potentially, at least the book is attributed to him, is really teaching us or sort of telling us. And for this entire series, usually we plan everything out from beginning to end. This series, I told you this last week, but I want you to be thinking about this. We're letting two things dictate what we're talking about each week. It's a lot more work and it's a lot more stressful to me, but as I continue to listen to the text, we're just allowing the things that sort of bubble to the top to be the stuff that we talk about for these 5 weeks. But I also want you to help us figure this out. And so if there are things that you see or hear as you read or listen to this book, shoot me an email. My email is rob@newhope.rocks. Shoot me an email. Let me know the things that really stand out to you. I want you to help determine that. And I just want to say a big thank you to Kendra Dice. It was Sunday, like right after church. She watched church. She tuned in for the live stream. And then she was having lunch. She listened to Ecclesiastes, and she sent me an email with a whole bunch of thoughts. I'm going to share one of them with you later. Jim Culler, it's just who Jim is. He was reading Ecclesiastes. Sandy Stanton. Sandy's actually on camera this week. Woo! And I love anytime we've done series where we've encouraged people to read a book of the Bible, Sandy is always one who sent thoughts and text messages. And you guys don't know how huge that is when I put like dozens and dozens and dozens of hours into a month's worth of messages, when really the collective team puts hundreds of hours into doing these things, and you guys actually engage and lean in. It is such a huge gift to us. So thank you to those three and to others who I've heard from this week, just some initial thoughts about Ecclesiastes. Now, this walk through Ecclesiastes, we're sort of using this play on words. We're calling this series The Meaning of Life. Because every one of us wants to know what the meaning of life is, right? We all want to know, hey, like what is up? What is really the meaning of life? We ask why all the time. We ask why when good things happen. We ask why when bad things happen. Because at the very least, we want to take some semblance of comfort in and through this idea that there's some greater meaning or purpose behind what we're going through, whether it's good or bad. And so we try to find or ascribe meaning to virtually everything in life. And so, great, wealthy, wise King Solomon, what is the meaning of life? And here's where we started last week. It's the second verse in Ecclesiastes, and here's what we hear. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. Great, right? Like, thanks for that little bit of encouragement. And he keeps going with this depressing futility throughout literally the entire book. Like, you can't escape it. Just when it seems like it's going to turn, it just goes right back to this. And I told you last week, that is why the first time I read the book of Ecclesiastes, I wanted to rip it out of my Bible. I literally hated it. Now, I had some people send me some different sort of initial reactions to the book, and I just want to read a couple of these for you. Here's one. This was the unique one. This one person said, I read Ecclesiastes a couple days ago. It felt just as good as it did the first time I read it. For me, it's always been like putting on that perfectly broken-in pair of boots, a perfect, comfortable fit. And I read that and I'm like, this person's crazy. That was not my experience at all. At least not until I had lived with the book long enough where I had broken it in. Or maybe, better put, where the Word of God, where the book of Ecclesiastes had actually broken me in. And I'd allowed it to sort of do its work in my mind. And in my heart. Here's another one that I got. It says, I don't like Ecclesiastes. I don't like Ecclesiastes. I do not like Ecclesiastes. Just in case you were unclear. I know God gave Solomon a gift to be the smartest guy in the world, but man, he sounds like a teenage girl. Everything is good one second, and the next he's complaining about what he just said. And then in chapter 7, he says, when times are good, be happy. But in all the chapters and verses before and after, he says, everything is meaningless and worthless. Make up your mind. Give me a chance to breathe before changing the COVID rules again. I love that, sort of that tie to what's going on, right? Like Solomon doesn't seem to make up his mind, and we live in a world where there's confusion and people don't seem to be able to make up their mind. And then I got one more. Listen to this one. A very similar sentiment. I do not like Ecclesiastes. That's where we start again. It seems like Solomon isn't content. He's doing everything, searching for all the things in the world that it has to offer. He's not content resting in God. He's still trying to fill a God-sized hole with grains of sand in a colander, right, that just sort of pass through. Although I'm not so sure, I wonder maybe if Solomon is realizing that I tried all this stuff and it didn't have meaning, and so he wants us to know that we shouldn't follow in his footsteps and try all those things, that there's a better way. Now, those last two really resonated with how I felt the first time I read Ecclesiastes. Maybe they connected with you too. Maybe for some of you, you haven't read through or listened to this incredibly gritty Old Testament book yet, and maybe they'll compel you to check out this challenging book and lean in because it's worth it. Now, here are the final 2 verses of the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes 12, 13, and 14 says this. Now that's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey His commands, for this is everyone's duty. God will judge us for everything we do, including every secret thing, whether good or bad. Now, last week I told you that we need to stop looking for meaning in all the wrong places, even places that sound good, like wisdom and pleasure, right? Everybody wants to be happy, and work and wealth, because all of those things, if we really go too far into them, they take more from us than they give back to us. And so instead, we are to fear God and obey His commands. Yes, enjoy life, eat, drink, and be merry, but remember, in the end, you and I and everyone who has ever lived will be judged for everything we have done. In and around all this meaninglessness, we don't look to anything here, even the good stuff. Instead, we look to God. And so, God, today, I just pray as we continue on in the book of Ecclesiastes, that you would give us a grittiness and a fortitude to push forward, to take the next step, to continue to engage this text in ways that speak to us and challenge us and ultimately change our lives. We ask these things together today in Jesus' name. Amen. Now, this week I want to give you some more thoughts from all around Ecclesiastes, and I just want to say right up front, it's not going to be quite as bad as last week, but we're not going to get a ton better. We're not going to take a huge step out of this pit of meaningless until the end. And then next week, I maybe, depending on what you guys say and what God says, I think we're going to kind of take a big step up. So I would like, for us, I think it would be good for us all to develop a greater appreciation for grit, for the grit that we have here. Because here's the truth, right? Sometimes in life, things do not work out. And we can all do the right things and still get wrong results. So when we lean into something that is gritty and really sort of sounds like life feels like a lot of times, this will help. So today, we're going to start with the most famous part of the book of Ecclesiastes. These are verses that I have read over people at every graveside committal service I have ever done. It's Ecclesiastes 3, verses 1 through 8. And you've probably heard these. Maybe you've heard the song where many of these fall in. And it says this: "For everything there is a season, and a time for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to harvest. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build up. A time to cry and a time to laugh. A time to grieve and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to turn away. A time to search and a time to quit searching. A time to keep and a time to throw away." Now, we have just 2 verses left. Usually by this point, I'm like, there's a time for like everything, and they're like listing all of them, right? The last 2, a time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be quiet and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. Now that's beautiful, right? Poetic. But what do? Do we just enjoy life, and sometimes when it gets difficult, we endure life, just knowing that God has given us a season for everything, and we've just got to be good with that? There are a couple things that we find throughout the text of Ecclesiastes. It basically says, you know what? When God has made something crooked, there's nothing you or I can do to make it straight. So we've just got to know that that's how God made it, and we've got to be okay with that, right? Or there's another spot that says this, that we would be better off if we could just accept our lot in life, right? Like, this is what God has given me. This is how it's going to be. I got to accept it, and that's how it's going to work. This is so much different than all the stuff we tell our kids, right? We tell them, hey, you know what? Seize the day, make your own future, become whatever you want to be. Like, do we ever just tell our kids, hey, I'm really sorry, you need to accept your lot in life because it ain't getting any better, right? Like, no, we don't do that. But that's what Ecclesiastes feels like. But watch what we see just after that series of famous verses. This is, for me anyway, very helpful. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says, "Yet God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart. But even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end." See, the ideas here are, in all the meaninglessness of life, remember God. And be thankful and actually see the beauty in every unique season of life. Right? We live in a state where we actually have seasons. We have spring and summer and fall and winter. And some people don't like the heat of summer, but there's good and beauty in that. And some people don't like the cold of winter, but there's good and beauty of that. You know what? Sometimes we should just be thankful that everything's not always the same, and that difficult seasons and things in life actually bring good. See, God has made everything beautiful for its time. And my favorite idea from that verse is that God has planted eternity in our hearts. Not that we get to see everything, but that there's just enough in us that helps us to keep going, right? Helps us to make it through, knowing that there is something that is greater and there is something more out there. This reminds me of the verse in 1 Corinthians 13:12 that says this, "For now we only see a reflection as in a mirror dimly. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known," right? Like that idea that we kind of look into a mirror and it's dim and we can't really make it out, but at some point it's going to be perfect. And as much as we all want more, we should be thankful that God has planted this. He's planted eternity deep within every single human heart. What a good gift that God has given us. Now, we're going to drop in a few more places. I want you just to brace yourself for a few more minutes. We're going to start at sort of the deep end of the pool, and then we're going to kind of climb out a little bit. So Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verses 1 and 2 tell us this. "There is another serious tragedy I have seen under the sun, and it weighs heavily on humanity. God gives some people great wealth and honor and everything they could ever want. But then He doesn't give them the chance to enjoy these things. They die, and someone else, even a stranger, ends up enjoying their wealth. This is meaningless, a sickening tragedy." Now, this sort of big idea, and I want to look at it that way, is really what I call when life goes completely sideways, right? When life just doesn't at all make sense. And it's not that things have always been bad, right? Like, this is my lot in life. I've never known anything better. And so, okay, I can kind of manage that. It's when life actually has been good to us, right? It's given us good things, or it taunts us with things that are very good, and then all of a sudden pulls the rug out from underneath us. This is worse, right? It's better to have nothing and still have nothing than to have a lot and really be enjoying life and then just to have it end. And it's not that we always reap what we sow here in life, or that if we just have enough faith, at some point things will get better. Sometimes life can be completely unfair, right? Sometimes it's just completely unfair. It's like the smoker who smokes packs a day and lives to be 100. And then the 65-year-old who's never taken a puff, getting lung cancer and not making it. It's the complete jerk who has a spouse that loves him and sticks with him, and then the nicest person you'd ever want to meet who goes through a messy divorce. Now, while faith doesn't always make things better, it does get us through. But that can feel like a small consolation when we really want to and even need to see some improvement. And then there's this other thing. In Ecclesiastes 7, verses 2 through 4, we see these words. Better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. After all, everyone dies. So the living should take this to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for sadness has a refining influence on us. A wise person thinks a lot about death, while a fool thinks only about having a good time. Now, if you're like me, like if you're hearing those words for the very first time, you're thinking to yourself, right, funerals are better than parties? Like, have you lost your mind? Right? We're thinking that. But here's the thing. We are all drawn to less valuable things. That's like the big idea I see here. Like, so here's what we think, right? Okay, sadness may have a refining property to it, but Rob, my life is hard right now. I need a ray of sunshine. There is absolutely no way I'm going to go to a funeral over a party. And maybe that's even bigger for me, because if it's a funeral, there's a whole bunch of work I got to do to get ready for the funeral, right? Like, it's like, the thing is this, the decision between thinking about death or having a good time for most of us is a pretty easy decision, right? We want to have a good time. We don't want to sit around and think about death. It's sort of like this. We live in a culture where if I'm like, hey, that thing you want or even that thing you need, would you rather buy it now or would you rather wait and save up a bunch of money, right? Most people would say, oh, I'm just going to buy it now, whether I can afford it or not. So here's the idea. We can't look to ourselves because our instincts are bad. We cannot be trusted. And then just one more bit of challenging news, okay? Just one more piece. Ecclesiastes 10, verses 8 and 9 says this. When you dig a well, you might fall in. When you demolish an old wall, you could be bitten by a snake. When you work in a quarry, stones might fall and crush you. When you chop wood, there is danger with each stroke of your axe. Now, this week at the Global Leadership Summit, somebody from a small group told me that the small group was going to go axe throwing this weekend. And so I actually read them this verse because I'm like, there's danger when you kind of get around axes, right? But here's like the idea I want you to think about. Bad can and does come from even good, right? Even when I and you are doing good, helpful, positive, constructive things, danger and problems and issues and challenges and fear and even death literally lurks everywhere. So the last two verses. And the context here, and I got to tell you this because some of you, especially the guys, if you're listening to this, you're going to be like, I knew it, right? It's not the point. The context here is the danger of a seductive woman and how godly people avoid those creatures and ungodly people fall into their snare. So that's why you're going to hear this thing that sounds like men are maybe a smidge, a touch, a skosh better. It's really not saying that. But listen to this. Ecclesiastes 7 verses 28 and 29 say this. Though I have searched repeatedly, I have not found what I was looking for. And the teacher was looking for someone who was virtuous. He says this, only 1 out of 1,000 men is virtuous, but not one woman. But I did find this. This is the point. God created people to be virtuous, but they have each turned to follow their own downward path. Now, the part I want us to focus on is this. After realizing that basically no one is virtuous, right? It's virtually impossible to find a person that is virtuous. The part that we see here, which is so good, is that we were all well made. Every single one of us, right? God has made all people, everyone, to be virtuous. But we've taken the wrong path. We've followed our own way. So God created all of us to be virtuous, and the only reason we're not is because we've taken our path instead of His path. But here's the good news. This is something every one of us can change. We can change this. We don't have to keep taking our path, the same path. So let's think about this. I want you right now to think about a child that you love. Maybe you have a young kid, maybe you have a grandkid, maybe you're like an aunt or an uncle. Maybe everyone in your life has already grown up and you don't have like a young kid around, but maybe you can think of one of your children when they were young. Doesn't really matter. Just in your mind, think of a young kid that you love. They're special to you. Now, for me, this is easy. I have a 6-year-old at home, Liam. And so one of the pictures I have when I think of Liam is this. So there are 2 things he loves to play. He loves to play Minecraft, and he loves to play Fortnite. Minecraft, Fortnite, Minecraft. He just loves both those things. He plays with his brother. He plays with a bunch of friends. He just loves doing those things. Now, as a 6-year-old, there are times where things aren't working out his way. Maybe his brother's not killing him too much on one of these things. Maybe what he's trying to build isn't working out. And I've seen this. Parents, if you have young kids, you know this too, right? Like sometimes there's sort of this like outburst of exasperation where he is just so frustrated at how things are going on. In those moments, especially when he's literally losing his mind over a video game, I just want to say, Liam, look at me, right? Look at me. That silly game, son, it doesn't matter. And I know right now, right this minute, it feels like it does, but it is meaningless. And if he would just take his eyes off that dumb thing long enough to look at his loving Father, I would help him see that and know that. I would. So here's the problem. Most of us, we look at all the wrong stuff. And this isn't just young kids, right? We look to wisdom. Oh, I'm smarter than everyone else. I know what's going on. And so there we go. Like that gets it done. No. Or we look to pleasure. I just want to be happy. I just want to feel good, right? And so we live life that way. That doesn't work. We work like crazy to have money and to feel significant. And in the end, what does that leave us with? Not much. Or we build crazy wealth, and like we saw last week right from the text, right, we die, or someone else comes and gets to spend all that we've worked hard for, even though they're a fool. But come on, I actually wore my Connor McDavid Edmonton Oilers jersey because actually this week I watched one of the playoff games. Edmonton Oilers are in a play-in game with the Chicago Blackhawks. They're way higher seed. They had a good season. They have 2 of the best players in the National Hockey League. It's been a few years since they made it to sort of this level. And so I'm watching game 3, series tied 1-1, best of 5, and the Oilers are getting like penalties called on them and penalties called on them, and it's driving me crazy, but they're killing their penalties. At the end of the first period, they're down 2-1. In the second period, they score twice, and they go up 3-2. And I'm like, this is good. And for most of the third period, like no scoring, they're in total control. And then with like 7 minutes, 5 minutes, I don't know, left, Chicago ties it up. And then with like a minute left, Chicago goes ahead on a couple of just sort of good fluky goals. And I tell you what, as a lifelong Edmonton Oilers fan, like I was a little bit like depressed for a minute. Now, let me use a thing that might resonate with us a little bit more. If you're tuning in and you are tuning in from another state or you're tuning in from another country, this might not resonate with you. But for those of us who live in Ohio, right, in the fall, when our beloved Buckeyes lose a game they should not lose, or late in the season we just have something, and it doesn't help that Mark Ellis up there in the sound booth is like antagonizing all of us on Facebook through all the games, right? Like, if something like that happens, before we get to the point of going, well, there's always next year, right? There's sort of this collective, and we live a little bit sadder for a while, right? We focus on things that ultimately don't matter. Now, one of the things that's been interesting for me for this last year, owning a little bit more property, is I have a lot of yard work. I spend a lot of time weed eating and mowing and cutting things down and just doing stuff. And one of the things I noticed after using my chainsaw for a while, the first time I didn't wear hearing protection, and then I couldn't hear properly for a couple days. So now, every time I'm doing anything, I actually have hearing protection on and eye protection. It doesn't matter what I'm using. And so, one of the unintended consequences of using things like that for literally hours at a time is that God, I feel like He has spoken more clearly to me. Now, you might think to yourself, well, Rob, as a pastor, that's a pretty cool thing to hear from God, right? And I guess I would agree with you in general if that's your sentiment, but I feel like the kinds of things He shares with me are the things that are breaking His heart. And so that then breaks my heart, and it becomes sort of this really difficult interaction. And over these last number of weeks, I've really sensed God saying the same thing over and over again to me. And we're actually going to do a whole series on this kind of thing in September. So if this interests you, the series in September is called I'm Right. And it actually was birthed years ago when my friend Phil Theophilus told me one time he was in marriage counseling, and the counselor looked at him and said, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? Right? And we live in a country and in a culture where people literally are so hell-bent on being right that it destroys things. And so we're going to talk more about this. But, you know, as I've been working in my yard, here's the thing that I feel like God's been saying. And it really doesn't matter what the issue is. It could be what your perspective is on the coronavirus, or what your perspective is on law enforcement, or race issues, or Black Lives Matter, or if churches should be gathering for in-person services or not. What ends up happening, what I see like 90% of the time, is if you're on the right, here's the list of things you say. And if you're on the left, here's the list of things. People don't really deviate from that. If you lean one direction, here's what I say, and if you lean the other direction, here's what I say. And so the thing that Jesus was sort of impressing upon me is how His heart breaks when we basically say to Him, Jesus, I am with you. As long as you agree with me, like I know you do. I know you see eye to eye with me on this issue and that issue, and you know what all those things are. I'm not even going to name them. And then we wonder why this fake Jesus that we have made in our own image has no power at all to save us. And the answer to it is because he is not real. Church, every election cycle we hear this, don't we? Oh, if this person wins, it's going to ruin our country. If that person wins, it's going to ruin our country. And that's the rhetoric, right? What's going to ruin our country is when we allow those things to drive us instead of our obedience to Jesus. We've got to follow him. God wants people who are willing to follow Jesus. And guess what? There are issues that Jesus is insanely conservative on. And there are issues where Jesus is pretty liberal on. And it's not because he's on the right or because he's on the left. It's because he is Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And we've got to start there and allow that to guide us and direct us, not our politics. You want to know how to find the meaning of life? Kendra Dice. Kendra, you are brilliant. Kendra emailed this to me last Sunday, just after church. I'm thinking about how when we as parents see our kiddos worry and get bogged down with what we consider to be meaningless, how much more God must see us in the same way as we worry and focus on stuff that doesn't really matter in the big picture. It was actually that paragraph that inspired this entire week. See, what if it's really just that simple? Instead of looking at all the silly things that you and I look at, what if we simply took our eyes off all that garbage and we looked at God? And he, in greater ways than we ever could, he helped us like we help our kids see what truly matters. Church, today, Jesus wants you to hear. He is saying these things to you. He's saying, look at me. And no matter how important that other things seem to you, listen, it is meaningless, and he is not. In the desert places of life, you can have faith if you would just look at him. If you would just look up. Because this is what matters.
There are some things that I don't understand. Some things I can't come to grip with. Sometimes I just look out in the world and think, why? Why me, God? Why this situation? Why them, Lord? Why this tribulation? Why? I've been down on my luck for a while. I mean, I don't even have an ace in the deck. Just empty hands with no patience that's left. I'm lost in the desert, no oasis. I guess I'm hung out to dry. Lips chapped, feet hurt in this weather. I thirst and I march on, hoping to find an answer. Just an inkling of faith in this world full of cancer would be a refreshing drip of water on the tip of my tongue. The fresh, cool breeze of Jehovah's lungs is exactly what I need. But that feels so far away. I mean, God, are you really with me? Do you really care? When I cry in distress, are you really there? Your word says yes, but sometimes I doubt it. But clearly my own path needs rerouting. Because every time I walk my own way, I get lost. And even though I'm lost in the desert, I now realize he created it. He knows where the water is. He made the sun. His creation is marvelous, and he is in control even when I fail. He is faithful even when I fall. He is what I need even when I doubt. He is fresh water in the midst of the drought. He is God and he is King. He is Lord and gives life to all things. He gives and takes away, and sometimes I just need to trust that he knows exactly
dear. All my hopes and dreams and all my fears, I would choose to trust your name in everything, with everything. I will look up, for there is none above you. I will bow down to tell you that I need you, Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of all. I will take you at your word. Jesus, you have taken hold of me. All my life is in your hands. You are my strength. You are my strength. I will look up, for there is none above you. I will bow down to tell you that I need you, Jesus, Lord of all. I will look back and see that you are faithful. I look ahead, believing you are able, Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of Prince of Peace, perfect healer, all my life, all my cares on you, King of Kings, mighty Savior, all my life, all my cares on you, Prince of Peace, perfect healer, all my life, all my cares on you, King of Kings, mighty Savior, all my life, all my cares on you. All my cares cast upon you, God. I will look up, for there is none above you. I will bow down to tell you that I need you, Jesus, Lord of all. I will look back and see that you are faithful. I look ahead, believing you are able, Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of all. Jesus, Lord of
I was so impacted as Rob spoke about the idea of a parent getting a hold of their child and saying, "Look at me." Because so many times I've done that with my own children when they're frustrated, just to get their attention. And I had this image when he was talking about how I respond in those moments as I get down on their level. I mean, I crouch down and I get on their face so that they have nowhere else to look but right in my eyes. And I imagine that God does that for us, that he comes into each of our moments and each of our like chaotic lives, and he's in your face going, look at me. If we would just look right at him, then he would have our gaze and he could really speak to us. And so this week, as you consider those moments in your own life where God is beckoning you to just look at him, my prayer is that you will hear him as he's calling, and that you will look up at him, because then he can really make a difference and he can speak to us. And we can surrender that we know he's in control even in these crazy things, when all these little things we focus on, if we can just focus on him, then it'll go a lot better. So enjoy your week. We hope that you join us next time, and be blessed.